The European starling was the first bird to ever visit one of my feeders, so it's always been a special bird for me. And how naive I was back then. I was certain that this brand new bird, which I'd never seen before, was a crow. Of course, crows are about 3 to 4 times the size of them. There are 65 varieties of starlings worldwide, but only one, the European starling, in the New World. They came here when Eugene Schlieffen in 1890 decided to release every bird that was mentioned in Shakespeare into the New World. So he released 100 starling pairs in New York City's Central Park in 1890-91. Now, of course, we have tens of millions of starlings. Starlings are also the only bird that actually talks back to me. I can mimic some of the things that the starlings do. Every once in a while, when I whistle at a starling, it will whistle at me back. And the starlings themselves are also famous mimics. Beethoven, for example, had starlings as pets because he loved their ability to mimic sounds. But enough about history and trivia on starlings, Hiltz. Why these starlings? Why this film? I was walking Bolo in Mount Greenwood Park when I came upon a family, 2 kids and their parents, who were hovering over some squawking little birds in the grass. The birds were from a nest in the people's house, an event in the house, and the parents wanted to get rid of the nest and the babies, so they brought all of them up to the park. My first inclination was to bring the birds home and try and raise them at my house. But then I realized, of course, wait, just put them up in a tree, and hopefully the parents will come by and they'll feed them. So I went home, rummaged around in the garage, and got an old flower box that looked like it might make a good nest for the baby starlings. I went back, I gathered up the 4 little birds from the ground, I ripped up some paper, I put it into the nest, then I brought all of them up into the tree. I was able to secure the nest well enough into the tree by both jamming it in between a couple branches and also tying a couple strings around to the branches around it. I felt that it was secure enough and would withstand even a heavy storm. After I got down out of the tree and walked over to the Peter Strasser, very soon one of the parents made itself apparent by squawking in the branches and finally visiting the nest and feeding the birds. To tell you the truth, I was very, very relieved, and I realized at that moment that birds are going to be fine. With the nest was unassailable from cats and dogs, and the parents were there to see the birds through for the next probably week or so until they fully fledged and are able to fly themselves. I visited the nest the next day after school. I climbed up the tree, and all 3 were there, and they looked healthy. The one troubling thing was, however, the nest in which they were now forced to live in was not their natural kind of nest. So they shitted all over the nest and had become quite beshitted themselves. It was disgusting, and I realized that I had to clean them or else they might get really diseased. So I took the birds out of the tree, I washed them in a bowl with warm water, and then I dried them off. All the while, the mother flew around the neighboring trees squawking at them. With the advent of the mother bird and the safety of the little ones secured, I knew that I didn't have to be their guardian for long. I could relax. I could see the Champions League final. My nephew's volleyball game. That's him, number 1. There would be J&B, mineworms in action. Even a trip up to the Wisconsin border in Grays Lake for Memorial Day. There were no winners here. I'm the winner here. So after several days of being away from them, I climbed up the tree to check back in on them, and guess what? They were gone. I figured they were okay. They were close enough and big enough to being fledged that they would be able to fend for themselves pretty soon. And in the nest, and with the parents close by, I'm sure everything was safe. So now, whenever I see starlings, I always wonder, are any of them my little birds that I helped save?